Good morning and welcome again to this lecture of literature. Today we'll try to explore one of the major literary genres, which is fiction. Right. Now, I would like just to point out to the fact that when I say fiction in this lecture, I mean mainly the novel. Okay. Although the term includes all the other forms, I mean the short story and the novella, but today, okay, even among critics, when we say fiction, we mean mainly the novel. Alright. Now, we'll start first by introducing, okay, the historical context, alright, in which the novel, okay, emerged and appeared. Talking about the history of the novel, of course, leads us to talk about, okay, the period where it really, okay, seized, okay, that major importance, alright, major importance. That's why, okay, we can say that the novel, or fiction in general, and the novel mainly, appeared and emerged, okay, as the major and most important literary form in the 18th century. In the 18th century. So in this century, there was what we call the rise of the novel. Okay, it emerged and it, overcome even the other forms like poetry and drama in terms of importance, in terms of readership, and also in terms of spread among the public. So, in fact, the novel, when it appeared and emerged, okay, as a main form of literature in the 18th century, this in no way means that, okay, before this date, okay, it was non-existent. By contrast, that's why the precursors, okay, or the early signs of the novel go back to the ancient and oldest texts, clear, of mainly the ancient literary heritage, right, and historical heritage of Rome and Greek. Okay, Rome and Greek. So here when we say the Roman or the Greek literary heritage, of course we remember the epics. Okay, the epic is considered the first, okay, form of literature which was written, okay, at that time. Now, what is interesting about the epic, alright? Why is it considered as a precursor to the novel, alright? While in fact it is only, okay, a kind of poetry, a kind of verse, alright? Now, if we look at the epics, we find that, okay, they are really poems. Okay, they are really based on verse, but the epics tend to distinguish themselves from the other types of poetry, right? In many ways, okay, in many ways, and these ways make the epics more akin to and more similar to fiction and to the novel, right? For example, if we compare between the epic and the other common poems we know, we find that they are different in terms of length. Because as you know that the epic is a long narrative poem which recounts heroic deeds. So this, if we can say, too long piece, okay, of verse is not like the other common poems that we know. Okay, they are not too long. Alright. So first, the epics are different from the other poetry in terms of length. They are longer. Also, in the epic, we have that narrative structure, because the epic recounts a story, okay, recounts the adventures, heroic adventures of a hero, clear. So also, second thing also about difference between epic and the other poems, it is, okay, or it has that narrative structure. It means it tells a story, like fiction. Also, we find in epics that depiction of characters. For example, if we read the Iliad of Homer, we find that he describes the different Greek, okay, and Trojan heroes like Achilles, like also the other one who is Hector, and so on. Clear. So here in this long narrative poem, also we have another feature of fiction, which is the depiction of characters. Also, another important feature within the epic and which distinguish it from poetry is the plot. Alright, the plot. So the epic also contains or has a plot, a series of events. A series of events from the beginning, introduction till the end of the story within this long narrative poem. So all these, alright, factors and features, okay, tend to distinguish the epic from the other poems, okay, and make it considered, okay, among or by critics as the precursor or the early sign of the modern novel. Okay, so together also we have another form which is the romance. The romance also is another type of narrative poem which was written nearly in the 18th or 17th or so century, and this narrative poem, which is romance, also has its own narrative structure also and characters, clear, and it was written sometimes even in the form of episodes, right, about chivalry, about courteous knights and so on, clear. So both of them, the romance as well as the epic, are considered, okay, the earliest precursors of the modern fiction or the modern novel. Good. In fact, when we talk about the modern novel also, we can here try to shed light on the first novel, okay, written in the world of literature. Critics, okay, agree that the first novel was written in Spain, okay, in Spain in the 18th century. It was the novel of Don Quixote, right, novel. This novel, okay, was written by Miguel de Cervantes, okay, Miguel de Cervantes, the Spanish writer, alright, who wrote the first, okay, novel, alright, in literature. If you come to the English literature, here critics also agree that the first English novel was Robinson Crusoe. Okay, the novel of Robinson Crusoe, right, written by Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe, always around the 18th century. So these two novels represent the earliest, okay, so we can say samples of the modern, okay, novel. Also, when we talk about fiction in general and novel in particular, we would like also to highlight those reasons, all right, which made the novel a major literary form among all the other forms, okay, like poetry and drama. The new established novel, all right, or the modern novel, in fact, experienced that shift, and it has become more and more concerned with those historical and social matters, okay. So that's why, okay, the novel in the 18th century acquired that, okay, a huge attention among both public and also the critics, and it was characterized by that spirit of realism and also individualism. All right. In the 18th century, the novel was characterized by that spirit of realism and individualism. These two terms, of course, indicate that the novel now has become more concerned with those social circumstances, clear daily life struggles of the individual, his position, okay, as an epitome in that social network, okay, and so on. So all these features which characterize the novel of the 18th century made it, okay, the focal concern of both public and the critics. Of course, this rank also was obtained for the novel after, okay, that, if you can say, useless and pointless, right, dimension, if you can say, of the earliest forms of literature, especially the Middle Ages literature, which was characterized mainly by that allegorical, right, and symbolic dimension. Clear, it was always those poems which were, written in a symbolic way, right, in an allegorical way, right, to tackle such or such a topic. Now, in the 18th century, right, with with that spread also of the urbanism clear and cities, right, public also, directed its attention, to those allegorical or from those allegorical and symbolic issues to those daily life, social, realistic, clear matters that touch him as an individual, Alright, that's why the novel became the major literary form, in the 18th century. Now, besides to this notion of realism and individualism, in the 18th century, the novel, until now, keeps its rank and the place as the major literary form, even in the 20th century. Here we can mention also one important reason for why the novel kept being always the major literary form is also novel shift, which occurred at the beginning of the 20th century, especially after publication of one of the prominent books in psychology, which is The Interpretation of Dreams by Simon Freud. The psychologist and the neurologist Simon Freud published his novel, his research or his book, which is entitled The Interpretation of Dreams, and he revolutionized the intellectual world, concepts about how to perceive reality and how to perceive different phenomena in the world. Alright, that's why also the novel also experienced another shift from that social spirit, in the 18th century to that individual spirit, we can say, by the beginning of the 20th century, especially with the rise of modernism and postmodernism. So these are among the two major forms or reasons or causes which led to the rise of the novel at the expense of the other literary forms. Also, we can here highlight certain other, we can say, important reasons in addition, which contributed to the spread, and to the, we can say, dominance of the novel and fiction, and how it made it replace, the other literary forms. Now, by the 18th century, at the time also, there was a rise of and spread of an educated middle class. Right. It means now societies have become more civilized. Urbanism, we can say, covered the whole societies. Right. Life has become, we can say, more comfortable. Right. There was a middle class which was educated. Readership spread. Literacy also spread. This made people, or the public, pay their attention also to those novels or to those forms of fiction, thanks to this spread of that educated middle class, Also, in the 18th century, there was a very important invention after, as you know, the Industrial Revolution in Europe mainly. It was the invention of printing. Alright, so printing also facilitated the spread of books, magazines, newspapers, and this led also to that boom of the press, newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, leaflets, and so on. So all these also were very spread and were also, we can say, consumed intellectually, by that urban, civilized, and educated public of the 18th century. So the also spread of the printing press is another important factor which contributed to the supremacy of fiction and of the novel in particular. Also, among the other factors which, if you can say, contributed to this rank, position of the novel, was the promotion of writing. Now, in the past, writing was only a kind of, volunteered, if you can say, act, a kind of amateur, task and so on. But after the 18th century, writing experienced that promotion, and it had become a professional, a career. Writing promoted, to be a professional career. Right? It means writers now became economically sustained. Right? By writing, they became now professional writers who earn their living from writing. So this factor also encouraged writers to produce more, and to write more, as now they are rewarded and they are, if you can say, receiving the incomes of their works and novels. Clear, works and novels. Good. So this is generally a historical, if you can say, background or context about the emergence and the evolution of the novel, and how it you can seize that position of supremacy, comparing, or of the expense of the other literary forms. Now, if you want to speak about the word fiction, fiction as a term, we can say that fiction, in fact, is derived from Latin word fictus, clear, Latin word fictus, which means to form. Now, as you know, the word fiction means imagination. Normally, it's imagination, right? It is imagination, but here, as you see, when we say fiction, we mean imagination. So the origin of the word is Latin, from the word fictus, which means to form. To form means what? To make up, to create, and so on. All right. Now, if you want to tie or to relate this etymological, if you can say, origin of the word fiction to its academic conception as literary term, we can say that to form means to make up, to invent, to create, and also fiction is really a form or sort of imaginative recreation of life. That's why it is called as fiction. It means fantasy, imagination. So we can define fiction as literary form and say it is an imaginative, recreation of life, imaginative narrative, imaginative story, an imaginative recreation of life in the form of prose fiction. It means in the form of usually sentences and paragraphs. Clear? And paragraphs. Go. Now, there is a very interesting saying which says fiction is falsehood of all sorts. Fiction is falsehood of all sorts. Of course, this expression reflects the core, or the essence of fiction, which is based on mainly imagination. But this in no way means that, the stories or the narratives we read in fiction are all of them purely fictitious, or imaginative. Alright. Sometimes, it can be realistic. Fiction can be based on a real story, but of course, this real story is, we can say, seasoned, is modified by writers through inserting in different elements, different events, changing the names of places, characters, to create that kind of suspense, suspense and coherence, and also to steer or stimulate the reader's attention, to read that novel. Also, it may be sometimes even purely factual, purely imaginative and fictional, like science fiction stories or narratives. These are totally fictional, as especially when their setting is in the future, which doesn't happen until now. And sometimes also we have a combination of, okay, reality and fiction. It's a mixture, alright, mixture. But all these forms always remain, okay, under the umbrella of fiction. Go. Let's now summarize, okay, briefly what we said, okay, about fiction. We said that number one, it is taken from the word. It is taken from the word fictus, alright, or the Latin word fictus, okay, to mean what? To mean, we said to form, means to form. Now, as a literature, we can define it as it is an imaginative. Alright, imaginative recreation. Recreation. It means here writers tend to discuss, okay, what's going on in reality, alright, but in the form of imaginative narrative form, alright. It's not a kind of reporting facts as they are, okay. Not a kind of reporting or documenting facts as they are. It's a kind of recreation, means you can say adding, okay, or representing it in a fictional, okay, and fictive way. So, recreation, recreation of life in the form of prose. In the form of prose. Now we move on to the different types or categories of fiction. Now, as you know, there are three major types of fiction. We have the short story, the novella, and the novel. The short story, as you know, is the shortest form of fiction. Here I would like to just remember the best definition, okay, for this type, okay, is the definition of Edgar Allan Poe himself. You know that Edgar Allan Poe is the leader of the American short story, and he defined it as follows. He said that the short story is a short piece of fiction that can be read, okay, in one sitting, alright, in one sitting, of a time about between half an hour to 2 hours, okay, to 2 hours. Now, this is Edgar Allan Poe's, okay, definition. Concerning the content of this short story, as you know that it's a bit short, right, and limited in terms of length. That's why it contains and it has and it focuses only on one, okay, major plot, on one plot, alright, or storyline of action. And as also its length is limited, okay, also it has or contains a few characters. So the short story is characterized by having one plot, alright, storyline of action, and also a few characters. Now, concerning the exact limits of its length, there is no here agreement or consensus among critics about the length, but there are some approximate considerations which consider, okay, the length of a short story between 25 to 30 pages. It means a short story should not or does not exceed 30 pages of length. Also, if we want to mention some examples of short stories, we can here remember the masterpiece, or the American classical masterpiece, The Legend of the Sleepy Hollow, written by Washington Irving, one of the prominent American writers, clear. And also we can mention also another story, which is the short story of Edgar Allan Poe, and which is the Telltale Heart. Okay, the Telltale Heart. This, if you can say, psychological masterpiece, okay, which represents the skill, alright, of Edgar Allan Poe in portraying, okay, that psychological trauma, okay, within that short story. The second now major type of fiction is the novella. The novella, of course, is going to be longer in terms of length, okay, than the short story, alright. That's why critics approximately consider its length to cover between 30 pages or 60 pages, 30-60 pages, till 120 pages, okay, from 60 till 120 pages. Now, as the novella is a bit longer than the short story, also it has one plot, but it has more complex plot, okay, more complex plot than the one the short story has, and also it has more characters. It has more characters. Okay. Now for mentioning some examples of some of the famous, right, or the prominent novellas, we can here remember also or mention the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, written by Robert Stevenson. Alright, it's one of the fascinating, right, imaginative novellas, alright, which was even filmed, okay, and also made in the form of cartoons too. Also, we have The Call of the Wild by Jack London. So these two masterpieces represent, okay, novellas, two novellas. All right. Now, if we come to the last type, which is the most important one and the widely read also type, which has a large readership among public, among readers, and even among critics, which is the novel. The novel, as you know, is the longest, okay, form of fiction. Longest form of fiction. And today, when we say fiction, we mean the novel usually. All right, usually the novel. The novel, in fact, also critics consider, okay, its length to be more than 120 pages. 120 pages. So, and more, this is considered as a novel, okay, or can be categorized as a novel. Now, with regard to the length of the novel, of course, it's going to have or contain not only one plot like the previous types. It has many plots, sometimes many plots with their subplots also, right, or storylines, and also it has more developed and ever-changing characters. Ever-changing characters, clear characters. In fact, its length, of course, is open, right? They can be as long as the writers want them to be, right? Here I also remember the longest novel written, okay, in literature. It was in the 17th century, and it covers nearly 13,000 pages with more than 2 million words. More than 2 million words. So here the length of the novel is, you can say, unlimited, okay, according to what the writers, okay, want them to be, of course. Just I would like to also add another remark about the novels. I would like here to mention some examples. For instance, we want here to mention also two of the major American novelists, which, thanks to them, okay, the American regionalism, you can say, or accent of or dialect of the American variation of language was adopted in literature. They are Mark Twain and William Faulkner. So these two writers, especially Mark Twain, who was the first American writer who adopted and used the American regional dialect in his novels. Okay, he wrote many fascinating masterpieces and novels, like the famous novel which is Tom Sawyer. Okay, also novel of Huckleberry Finn, right? And also he has many other works of fiction. For William Faulkner, he has, for example, also many complex, and deep novels, like, for example, The Sound and the Fury. Okay, it is one of his masterpieces that got even the admiration of nearly all critics. Clear. Finally, I would like just to mention that, or to point out the fact that today critics, they even consider many other types, or genres which are modern, in addition to the common ones. I mean fiction, or prose, verse and drama. They may add also these days movies or films, by critics. So critics, they consider films and movies also as another literary genre which has an audiovisual form. So we stop here, and this is our, we can say, the end of our lecture for today. Thanks so much, and wish you the best. Good luck.